Many of you know our keynote speaker today, Michael Dominguez. He's Senior Vice President and Chief Sales Officer for MGM Resorts International. He has more than 28 years of experience in our industry. He's responsible for global sales strategies in the convention, leisure, and transient segments. He also including the industry relations, diversity sales, and MGM Resorts events. So he does a lot of things for MGM. And in addition to that, he is a true industry leader. He's involved in a lot of different organizations, currently serves as the MPAI past chairman. He serves as the on the executive committee of U.S. Travel Association and is co-chair of Meetings Mean Business, the Meeting Mean Business Coalition. He has made a name for himself, not only within FICP through our entire industry. He is backed by popular demand this time on our main stage. Please welcome Michael Dominguez.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. I tell you what, it was really fun backstage. We were trying to figure it out. It's Mamma Mia. I love that show. All the props in the back are Mamma Mia. It must be in the theater. Seriously, that's what I was doing backstage. I was looking at all the props. It's really cool. This is exciting. I'm thrilled to be here and thrilled to be able to share with you what's kind of going on in the meetings industry. So I'm gonna go through a little bit of a snapshot, and since we only have about 45 minutes, when I get to the economic side, I'm kind of putting it all into one bucket. But we're hoping we have enough time for a few questions if you might have them at the end. But let's go ahead and get started, and if you want to slow down and raise your hand, please feel free. But let's look at what's happening in the meetings industry today. And you know, the thing that we continue to talk about is speed and how fast everything is moving. And this is one of my favorite quotes of all time. This is Klaus Schwab. He's the founder of the World Economic Forum. And I love this quote. He says, in today's world, it's not the big fish that's going to eat the small fish. It is the fast fish that will eat the slow fish. And I think that is so real. And as a meetings industry, as a hospitality industry, we don't move fast enough. We think we do, we pound our chests, we talk about being innovative, we talk about being thought leaders, and I always like to joke, it took us 40 years to figure out that the bed was an important part of the guest room. We are not that quick to change. And I don't think it's a desire issue. I really do think we want to change. It's not easy to change. Most of us don't have the time to change because we're being asked to do so much. And there's a lot of risk in change, so I applaud FICP. You know, you talk about change and risk. I'm standing on a cruise ship. At one of your annual conferences, and what a cool venue, and what a different experience, and a way to get you out, and a way to get you moving. And you know, when we talk about change and the speed of change, technology is moving the fastest, and I think we all can agree on that. But technology is not the end all, but this is kind of what it feels like when we talk about technology.
It is the newest,
even newer. Everything else is obsolete.
Oh, wait. Oh, 4D TV? Stupid.
You got the wrong TV, silly head.
The new...
I love that commercial. Funny thing is, you know, that was Best Buy when they were struggling. And they were struggling because the world was changing around them. And that's kind of where we struggle. I'm a big fan of John Chambers. And John Chambers is the CEO, or the immediate past CEO of Cisco. And he just retired July 1st. And you know, John talks about innovation all the time, but I was able to see his speech at Cisco Live this past year, and you've got to understand, he has his 1,000 best customers in the room, and he's able to look at all of them and say, 40% of you in this room will not be relevant in any significant way in the next 5 years. Now, he's telling his best customers that, and I'm a firm believer of it. And when he talks about it, you know what he says? You're not going to be relevant because you cannot change fast enough. And it has nothing to do with the technology. It has to do with your ability to look at the world a little differently, the way to change your structure of what you do every day. That's what you're not going to do. And that's going to be a message that continues throughout this presentation because the world's changing. You need to look at the world a little bit differently. And we're going to talk about what that looks like. But let's talk about what's happening with the hotel industry. And I like to start global and then kind of bring it back to the United States. And when you look at the global meetings industry, what you'll see on this chart is that the entire globe in 2014 grew in RevPAR. We actually set records in RevPAR across the country. And for every meeting professional in the room, RevPAR in its simplest terms is rooms revenue. So rooms revenue set an all-time record around the world, and that was important. And when I looked at 14, that was wonderful because in 2009, when we crashed, 88% of the world was in a negative decline in RevPAR. So they actually hit the bottom in 2009. 88% of the world. So to know that we've recovered, it means the global economy's recovered. It means our global industry is very healthy. But I was really concerned because when I looked at this and I looked around the world, worried about the Middle East and was worried about the instability in governments and worried about what was happening with ISIS, was definitely worried about South America. We keep talking about South America as an emerging market, and you see up here on this chart, they were up. South America was up 14.1%, and that sounds wonderful. It's called World Cup. And you know, the one thing about a World Cup or an Olympics, you really don't want to host it the next year, or because the next year after, you're going to stink. You're going to decline and decline dramatically, and all history has shown that. And then we look at what's happening in Asia Pacific, and we knew the economy in China was already slowing down. We knew Putin is kind of out of his mind, and things are all really chaotic in the Asian continent. That was a concern. And when we look at 2015, we're now halfway through the year, and unfortunately, the Middle East is declining. And you look at what's happening in Asia Pacific, we're declining. And you look at South America, and it's declining. These were all the concerns we had that were going around the globe, and this was one of the times I was hoping I wasn't right, because these were the concerns, and that's not good for us as an overall industry. Our biggest concern right now, you'll see Europe's up 7.6%. Now, Europe is in pockets as far as where their economy is, but there is some major, major concerns that are happening in Europe today. The number one concern is what's happening with the refugee crisis in Syria. And the refugees that literally are going to now migrate into Europe, and Europe is bringing them in. Well, Europe already has an unemployment problem. So to start adding millions of people that are now being added to a workforce that already can't find jobs, major challenge on an economy that's still on shaky ground and still recovering. So we're a little bit worried about what's happening. And again, here's what's happening around the world. If I was to take a snapshot of all the concerns we have as far as world economy and what that means to us as an economy and what that means to us in meetings, this is it. We look at China. China's a mess because China's declining. China also has one of the oldest populations in the world. It has an aging workforce with no one to replace them. It's great that we talk about China having the largest middle class. They're well educated today. Kids are going to school in Western universities. You know what happens when you start to have that kind of dynamic? They're not going to go work in factories. So how are you going to continue to be the number one manufacturing engine of the world if you can't have anybody replace your aging workforce? They have some challenges. They're also trying to move to an economy that is consumer-based versus manufacturing-based. Kind of a challenge when everything is declining and they're struggling as a whole. The US dollar. The US dollar is literally creating havoc around the world. We have one of the strongest US dollars that we've ever seen, and that is bad for the economy. And I know that sounds really ass backwards, but it is the truth. We cannot have a strong US dollar. It's bad for a global economy. It's bad for a US economy. It's bad for the oil industry. It's bad for everything. And I always say the US dollar is kind of like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Yeah, it can't be too high, it can't be too low, it needs to be just right. And right now it's too high. And that is going to continue to make us struggle around the world, and that leads us right into oil. You know, what's happening with oil? A strong dollar coupled with a glutton supply. We have too much oil around the world. We're not using enough of it. Now, you know who the number one addition of oil in the world supply was? The United States. And it all came from fracking, and literally down the middle of the country over to the Louisiana coast. And you know what's going on today is OPEC could stop this tomorrow by literally pulling back on the supply and what they're putting into the market. OPEC only needs oil to be at $7 a barrel to make money. Our frackers need it to be at 50. Guess who's getting hammered right now? The frackers. And OPEC's goal is to put the frackers out of business. What we have not talked about in the United States, we've lost 120,000 jobs since January, all due to oil. And all due to the fracking industry. This is going to continue to be a play worldwide, at least through the end of the year. European challenges, I already told you about the economy, unemployment. Spain's unemployment is over 20%. Italy's unemployment is in the high 15%. And if you get to youth unemployment, it's even worse. This is going to continue to be a struggle, and now you put the refugee crisis in play, that's going to continue to drag this market down. The emerging markets, they're not emerging. That's the problem. We've talked about emerging markets forever. I've already told you about China. When you go to South America, and we've all been really thrilled with South America, here's the problem. You actually have Brazil that is having a major economic crisis. You have Argentina that has defaulted on its debt. And you actually have Venezuela that has the worst currency crisis in the world. That is not good for South America, and it's going to continue to be a decline. There's only one emerging market today, and it's India. India is still the emerging market. It's taking manufacturing share away from China, and it continues to grow at a very rapid pace. Everything else that we've considered emerging markets starting to slow down. And then we look at safety concerns, and you know, the travesty and senseless killings that happened 2 days ago in Paris. Please make no mistakes, what you experience today coming on a ship is going to be our norm for life. It is going to be what we are going to start to experience. Stephen mentioned I'm part of the Meetings Means Business Coalition, and I'm on U.S. travel. And you know what is a sad statement sometimes with our communities is it had to be hundreds of people that died before we really paid attention. Because there were 9 people killed in Europe not too long ago when somebody went shooting into a shopping center, and we didn't have quite the same concern as we did this time. And it's because the number got bigger. Now, why do I stress that? Because when that happened in Europe 6 months ago, my first comment or my first email was to my friends at U.S. Travel, where I sit on a couple of committees to say, are we prepared when this happens to a major meeting in the United States? Because it will happen someday. That somebody is going to walk in and start shooting at a convention center, at an event, at a major sporting event. That is going to be a concern for us. And that is us trying to get ahead of it, saying, what is the safety issue, and what does that look like? It's already impacting air service in Europe. It's going to impact your experience when you travel overseas, and many of our meetings are global today. This is going to be part of our global commitment because everybody is going to kind of unite, and guys, we're back into the fight. This was kind of the call to arms, and you're hearing it. It's the first time you've heard it even from the United States that we're with France, and we finally need to go take out ISIS. It's finally the comment. We have not heard that, and that is a nice thing. Yes, I agree. And we can do it, and it's about time, but this is going to be a really important change for us moving forward. So then I look at the U.S. economy. What's going on in the U.S. economy that kind of keeps me up at night? Janet Yellen doesn't keep me up at night. That's not what I meant, but the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen is going to raise rates, and she has been hinting and talking about it, and we know interest rates are going to continue to rise for the first time in 8 years in this country. That will slow down the economy just a bit. It will move money out of the stock market into other investments, which is going to freak people out a little bit. Realize it's coming. Don't get nervous. It's part of the cycle. We look at the 2016 election. There's never a good time to have an election in the U.S., and literally when you're trying to get the economy going and you're going to raise interest rates, it's the worst time you could have an election. We're going to spend a year watching 2 parties beat the hell out of each other and all give us negative news to where we just feel really depressed about our lives until we get past it. And once we get past it, things will start to move again. All the data tells us this. We all tighten up September, October, and November around the election. Always. And it's because you're getting hammered in every news vehicle you can imagine. Everything in print, everything in radio, everything in TV is telling you again how bad the world is and we need someone to fix it. That is going to be a challenge moving forward. The employment concerns that we have in this country, I get really irritated with the media for a lot of reasons, but I get really irritated on how they report certain things. We've probably all read that the unemployment rate is down to under 5.5%. And we're all celebrating because that is kind of normal employment. The challenge is they don't couple it, and I believe in the Mayo Clinic approach to data. Let's take all the data points and see what it's telling me, not just one. And when I look at the unemployment number, yeah, it's great that unemployment is under 5.5%. That unemployment number is only a number that registers how many people can actually be eligible for benefits. It doesn't mean they have jobs, because this has been a long-term unemployment problem during this cycle, which means people have been out of work more than 24 months, which means they don't apply for unemployment anymore. Here's the other 2 pieces of data that concern me. Part-time unemployment is at a record high and almost 4% higher than it was before we started this recession. So the people that have gone back to work are not working full-time. And then here's the bigger concern. We have a labor participation rate that is at its lowest point dating back to 1970. So we have more people out of the workforce. We have more people working part-time. It does not mean we're at full employment yet. And that's going to continue to be a struggle. You know where it's really driven by right now is housing and building. We're not building a lot of commercial product, and we're not building a lot of hotels. We're not building a lot of homes. That's where a lot of the jobs disappeared during this crisis. That's going to continue to be a challenge for us. Corporate earnings. We're in earnings season right now. Earnings are starting to soften up. You know why they're softening up? Because of a strong dollar. because we have global companies, and unfortunately, where they're making their money overseas, it's coming back in at a much smaller pace. So unfortunately, they're losing. And every earnings call, you're hearing the same thing. We did okay. It's the currency exchange that's killing us. That's going to continue to be a concern for us. It's going to continue to drag the market down. Death of the unicorns. You know what a unicorn is? Unicorns used to be a company that was valued at $1 billion when it actually launched as an IPO. So why did they used to call them unicorns? Because they were hard to find. Guess what? We launched almost 35 unicorns in the last 18 months. So unicorns aren't that hard to find anymore, but the venture capital money is starting to dry up because the venture capitalists are understanding they're putting a lot of money into these social media companies that, except for a handful, don't make any money. You know, it's really great and exciting that we love certain pieces of new technology. The problem is they don't have a business model that shows they can make money. That's going to continue to be a challenge moving forward. And then the safety concerns, the same concerns I talked about overseas, going to be the concerns here. I guarantee you we will tighten up all of our methods here in the United States, knowing what just happened in Paris. I got a note from my president literally over the weekend, and it was an email talking about this. You know, are we prepared? What's going to happen? Because we know it's going to have impact moving forward. So let's talk about the U.S. hotel industry. If we bring it back home, what's going on here? If we go back and look at our old record of 2008, we actually hit $107 billion, and that was the old record. If you look at 2013, we far surpassed it. We recovered as a hospitality industry back in 2012, and I think that's a message that isn't actually talked about enough. We are no longer recovering. We are expanding as an industry. And that's important to understand. Now, 2014, we broke a record again at $133 billion. You know what we're going to do in 15? We're going to break another record. You know what we're going to do in 16? We're going to break another record. There's a trend here. There's a message here, and it's not going away anytime soon. This is the market set and the market conditions we're looking at. So that is kind of history. What are we looking at in 2015? Halfway through 2015 or 2/3 through 2015, we've hit a record in every major category in the hotel industry in the United States. It has never been stronger. And if there's anyone in this room who said, we've been here before, I know what this looks like, no, you haven't. And I'm going to show you why. This recovery and this expansion is structurally different than anything we've ever seen in our lifetimes. And these conditions we'll probably never see again in our lifetime. You know, when you look at these records, I like to first take a snapshot of the group market because that's what we care about. Well, if you look at the old record in group, we actually hit that old record back in 2006. 83 million room nights that were attributed to group room nights in the United States. We actually hit a bottom, and that was back in 2009 at 70 million, and now we basically are back to the 83 million a year ago. We are well past the old record in group demand. So we're putting in almost 1.2 million more room nights in the United States last year than we had in our previous peak. That's telling us we're much stronger than we ever have been. But what's really changed is the mix of business for us. This is one of those structural changes. And when we look at the mix of business, if you look at back to our old peaks in 05, look very similar to 7 and 8 and 9, almost 59% of our business was non-group or transient business. And you see the other 41% was group. Today, the non-group sector has grown to 66%. That 7% shift is dramatic. And this recovery had been led by the non-group sector. Here's the change and the structural change. You know what the biggest difference is? International travel. International traffic to the United States is up almost 45% over the last 3 years. This change and this dynamic is the international audience. We have more people visiting the United States than we ever have in history. Before the Travel Tourism Promotion Act in 2010, we literally, as a country, never advertised around the world. That Travel Tourism Promotion Act gave us the ability to advertise around the world. We were the only country that never promoted tourism around the world. I always said it's our American arrogance. They're going to come because we're the U.S. And you know what happened between 2000 and 2010? We call it the lost decade because we were the only country in the world that declined in international visitation. And we realized the world was kicking our butt when it came to competition. So we went out and we started promoting. We're doing a really great job of it. That's shifting the numbers. So why does that matter to you as a meeting professional? You know what we're finding today? Everybody is blowing through their blocks today. We contracted conservatively in a downtime, as you should have, so that you weren't stuck in an attrition situation. But today, everybody is blowing through their blocks when they come in. And you know what happens? We get the phone call, and it's 3 weeks out, and you're saying you need more rooms, and you're being told I can give them to you, but they're going to be at a higher rate. And then we freak out saying, wait a minute, if you have them, why would you charge me a higher rate? Because this is the difference. Back 3, 4, 5 years ago during the last norm, when you called me 21 days out, most of my audience in the non-group sector was going to be coming within those 21 days because it was a domestic traveler. You know what happens with international? They don't wait till 3 weeks out to book their room to the United States. They're booking that room 90 days to 120 days out, so my window has shifted. And if you're asking a hotel to give up money in rate, I have no opportunity as a hotelier to make it up today. I used to be able to make it up because I would be charging my leisure guests and my transient guests a little bit more to make up for the rate sacrifice you just asked me to give you. That's the shift, and we don't talk about it. So 90 days is a big key. I always try to tell this to all meeting planners. Please, 90 days is kind of our metric in a hotel, because you know what happens every 90 days? We forecast. Every 90 days we forecast for the next, or every month we forecast for the next 90 days. Why does that matter? Because at that point I promise my ownership and my management group what's going to happen. And at that point my hands get blocked. Outside of 90 days I have a lot of flexibility. If you have a program that you think is falling apart, let me know it's falling apart. If you have a program that you think may not pick up, quit putting your cards next to your chest saying I'm not going to show it. Because all you're going to do is give yourself a lot of frustration. Because if you let me know at 90 days or before 90 days that you may not, or that you have a little bit of concern, you know what that does to me? It makes me forecast more conservatively. But if you're telling me everything is okay, I'm forecasting to your full contract. That's a little bit different for me, because I will be more conservative. I'd rather tell somebody I beat forecast than missed it. You know, that gives me the ability to say, well, maybe I'll be a little more conservative as far as what's going to happen and what I share with my ownership group. That is a big shift for us, and we have to really pay attention to this, because this is going to continue. All models are telling us right now this isn't changing, because surprisingly, when you look at these two lines, the green line here is your transient mix and your blue line is your group mix. And when I look at these two lines, I would expect them to start converging at some point, because group demand, I showed you, has really started to pick up. At some point, I would think the mix of business would start to come back to normal. They're separating even further. So even though group demand is growing at a much rapid pace today, or a much faster pace today, what's happening is transient's moving just as fast. So it's not changing. And you know what's the thing about an international traveler? They're going to stay with me on average 7 days, spend $2,500, and they cost me no labor because all they do is go shop. They're not even in my building. So that makes it real easy and a real attractive customer for us to attract in a hotel. So let's talk about what's happening to rates. You have this kind of demand in the US. What is that doing to our rate parameters? I really focus on the luxury and upper upscale, because this is where you place your meetings. This is the only place you place your meetings, because these are the type of hotels that actually have meeting space for them. So when I look at the luxury and upper upscale, we actually have set all-time records in luxury and upper upscale. So in luxury segment, we're over $300, we're at $315, and the upper upscale, we're at $175. And again, it's not going backwards because of a couple of structural changes that are going on right now. And if I take a snapshot of the group market, when you look at the group peak, we hit the group peak in 2008, we fell off the cliff in 2009, we recovered our peak rate back in 2013, midway 2013. We were back to the old group peak rate. So I always tell people, because unfortunately, as a meeting professional, you have stakeholders that are setting your budgets. And you have some CFO or somebody that has an O in their title, and they usually like year over year. They usually like the year over year analysis. You know what? I try to challenge, and this is really good data to share with them. Your budget should look much more like 2008 and 2007, because 2010, 11 never happened. I mean, if you're looking at it from a finance standpoint, they never happened. It has no relevance in what you're trying to put out there today. So you really have to take a look at the 2007 and 2008 budgets and say, do my budgets look more like 07 and 08, or are they still looking at like 10, 11, and 12? Because that's not the world we're going to be living in anytime soon. And you can see the further we get away from 09, the more aggressive the rate growth and the percentage of rate growth. And actually, rate growth would have been higher, but you know what happened? We had a drag effect. And this drag effect is from all the business that we booked in 9 and 10 for future years in an environment that we knew the world was falling apart, and every message at every hotel was, whatever you do, don't lose it. Whatever it takes, just book it. And it's funny how my bosses forget that, because in 2014 they're saying, why isn't the rate growing fast enough? Because that stuff that you told me, whatever you do, you're forgetting that I did it. So I've actually done it, and it's in there, and that kind of has to get out of the cycle before we continue to move forward. That rate is going to continue to grow, and the rate variance is going to continue to grow. But here is the big shift. This blue line is the transient rate, and the green line is the group rate. So even as the group rate is growing, the variance between the transient rate is even growing at a faster pace, which means that transient guest, which I have more of, is paying a lot more money than you as a group customer. That's the rub today. And why does that matter? Because not all dollars in a hotel are equal, and you have to understand that. A dollar in room rate is a pure dollar in profit. So it doesn't matter when you say, well, I'm bringing you food and beverage. Yeah, but my food and beverage runs me a 40% profit, while my room rate runs me 100% profit. So if I'm giving up $50 in room, you have to be giving me $150 in food and beverage per day per room to make up for what you just asked me to give up. That's the rub today. And the transient, traditionally, it would start to slow down as group was starting to grow. It's not. The variance in these lines are getting further and further apart. And we don't see that changing anywhere over the next couple of years specifically. So we look at what does the next couple of years look like. Well, if you look at STAR's forecast for 15 and 16, I really focus on ADR. Rate's going to grow at 5%. So if you have somebody that's giving you a budget that says, I'm only going to increase your budget by 2.5%, you're not going to be able to meet anywhere, because most rates are growing at double that clip, and food and beverage is even growing at a faster pace. And that is going to continue to be the issue. Now, when I told you you've never been here before, if you look at PKF, just did a study to look at the future. Now, PKF, by the way, they're within 0.1% the last 3 years as far as forecasting. So they're pretty accurate in what they do. And here's what you want to look at. If you look at the 20-year average of the long-run average of our industry in the luxury segment, 70% is occupied. That means 70% is where we usually are when we're fully occupied. We're going to be running 75% over the next 3 years. We're not even in the vicinity of what used to be the norm. So this is a big issue for us because we're hitting all-time record demand. And then if we go to all hotels in the U.S., all hotels, 66% was your running average to be fully occupied. And we're estimating that we're going to be in the 71 percentile over the next couple of years. We're 5 to 6% past where we've always been normal. And that is a huge change for us in demand. And again, we don't see it getting smaller, we see it getting larger. And when you look at revenue increases by area, it's in all sectors of the hotel. Rooms, food and beverage, other food and beverage, which is, you know what, audiovisual. All of a sudden, people are doing the big presentations again. Technology is wonderful, it's not cheap. So when we bring technology into meetings, it's costing us more. That increase is going to continue to be reflected in our budgets. And I can tell you, in talking to many of my meeting professional colleagues, their budgets aren't increasing at that pace because their CFO and their bosses don't get this. So again, this hopefully gives you a little bit of data. I've spoken to more financial procurement and CFO officers than I ever wanted to in my life because I've had clients that have come to ask me to do this. And sometimes it's really painful, and I mean this sincerely, but what's interesting is when they see the data, they tend to get it. Once you show them the data, it's no longer your opinion. And they start to understand this methodology. So it's important, and that really is part of my mission today, is to be able to arm you for those discussions. So you can go back and say, look, this is what the world is really looking like. And I sometimes say it's unfair because they're asking you to pull a rabbit out of the hat to be able to pull these meetings off. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. So what concerns do we have in the meetings area? You know, when I look at the meetings ecosystem, we have a supply and demand issue. We have weather and food concerns. I'm going to talk about that. We have airlift concerns, and we have other disruptors. And when I look at other disruptors, here's a couple, or when I look at supply and demand, let's start here. Here's the big shift. I've already told you we've had record demand. The biggest problem we're having today is we have no new supply in the market. So when I look at this chart, if you look at this very far right-hand side, you'll see the 20-year average, orange is supply and green is demand. They're almost even. Over 20 years, they're almost always even. But if you look at what's happened over the last 5 years, the green bar is well outpacing the orange bar, which means demand is far outpacing supply. So let's go back to basic economics. Basic economics school. If you go back to any class you've been in, all-time high demand, no new supply, what's going to happen to prices? They're going to move. And that's exactly what's happening today. We have no new supply in the meetings market. It doesn't mean hotels aren't getting built. There's just nothing in the meetings area. Now, why does that matter? Almost 70% of everything that's been built over the last 2 years is limited service. Hampton Inns, the Hilton Gardens, Courtyard by Marriott's, those are popping up everywhere. Why? Because they make money. The big boxes do not typically make money. And that's important to know. When you see a big hotel being built, it's traditionally a real estate play, not a hotel play. Somebody's building that knowing that the real estate's going to appreciate at some point and they're going to be able to flip it. But limited service, they all make money. And they all make money because they have very little overhead. And I always say, look, this is no offense, they offer no service, but I always say if I was ever going to own a hotel, I'd own a limited service hotel because they make money. They make about 45% profit before they ever pay debt service, while a typical hotel is going to make anywhere between 20 to 25 before debt service. So it is a big shift. Why? They don't have 24-hour room service. They don't have laundry facilities. They don't have a restaurant they have to keep open even though no one's going to eat in it. I mean, those are the issues that they don't have to deal with that everybody else does. So why are these the type of properties that are popping up? Two reasons. One is cost. Secondly, this was a banking meltdown. It was a financial crisis that we had in 2009. Well, because of rules and regulations that were put in place, there wasn't a bank that was going to be able to loan on a risky project. So what are they building? Limited service because there's no risk. We know they make profit. We know they make a lot of profit. This is why this is what's been being built. And when I look at the other piece from a cost standpoint, if you look at this chart, the gray shows you what it costs to build a hotel and by scale of hotel, and the red shows you what it costs to buy. So if you're in the limited service area, are you going to build or buy today? You're going to build because it's much cheaper to build a limited service hotel than it is to buy one. But if you are in the luxury and upper upscale, and this is again where you put your meetings, this is why nothing's being built. Look at the cost to build versus to buy. And there's a reason today you're seeing all the mergers. There's a reason you see Marriott buy Delta Hotels. There's a reason you saw IHG buy Kimpton, because it is cheaper to buy than to build. It is the only way to grow today. Now, why is that? That hasn't really changed much, but you know what the difference was? The only way we could ever finance those projects in the past was through a mixed-use development. Everything you saw built for about 10 years had condos or a business complex or some type of timeshare to it. You know what doesn't sell today? Condos and timeshares. Nobody's buying them today. So we can't pencil out a way to build these type of resorts. That is going to continue to be the issue. There is no, on the horizon, there is nothing that is telling us that the supply issue is going to be taken care of over the next couple of years. This is the environment we're going to continue to live in. Record demand and not a lot of new supply in the meetings environment. Doesn't mean there's not new supply, but none in the meetings environment. So the question I always get, so where are we? Where are we in this cycle, Mike? Because it is a cycle and we know that. We're on the back nine. We're just starting the back nine. We've passed Amen corner. We've said our prayers and we know that it's coming to an end at some point. But we are on the back nine. I can't say we're on hole 15. We're probably on hole 10 or 11. We've got some golf to play still. And that's the point. It's going to be over the next couple of years. You're going to see this to continue to be the mode. My bet is by 17, you start to feel a little bit of softness. But realize what I've just told you. A little bit of softness, I could be at 73% occupancy and I'm still 3% over the 20-year average. It doesn't mean it's going to soften much. It's just going to soften a little bit. And that is kind of our anticipation over the next couple of years. So what about food and weather? Everything that happens in the world impacts our industry, and we don't talk enough about it. And I always say part of my job is to connect the dots. What is going on and how does it impact you? Well, when we talk about food, let's start there. We talk about the food issue. This is actually a chart of food pricing with every different dynamic of food. So you got fish and seafood, white bread, meats, eggs, a little bit of everything. The only thing I'm trying to point out, since 2005, you see a dramatic increase in these lines. Before 2005, they were pretty moderate growth. Everything is increasing in food price. And it's an interesting one for me. I always say the disconnect in our industry is for some reason your grocery bill's gotten more expensive and you think the hotels has gotten cheaper. That is the disconnect. Because this is the place everybody thinks we have the most flexibility. This is the place everybody asks for a 10% discount. And it's my number one cost area behind labor in a hotel. And it literally is the fastest growing in cost of product. It's something I cannot keep up with. And when I look at what's happening around the world and I say connecting the dots, do you know we killed 43 million chickens between February, March, and April in the United States? Because we had a bird flu that broke out in the Midwest, and we had to literally kill 43 million chickens that produce eggs. So that's a big issue for us because it started to impact the egg supply around the United States. Now, why does that matter? There's two types of eggs, and the reason you haven't quite felt it yet at your grocery store, but you will, the reason you haven't felt it yet is it was the break egg population that was most impacted. So there's two types of eggs that are produced at these farms. There's whole eggs, which you buy in your cartons, and then there's break eggs. Break eggs are the ones that we say, break the shell, give them to me in a bag, and they're liquid because I'm going to scramble them anyway. You know where they go? They go to hotels, they go to restaurants, they go to commercial establishments. The break egg population is what was most impacted. Eggs today are 142% more expensive than they were in January in the break egg area. And I made a comment a while back that I said, get ready for surcharges if you're going to have eggs for breakfast. Get ready for more expensive breakfast items if you're going to have eggs for breakfast. And it's interesting, a planner was traveling and she sent me a text with a picture because she's in a restaurant, and it said, because of the egg shortage, we have a surcharge of $1.25 for any egg whites. And she was just trying to tell me, I just saw it. And it was happening in a local restaurant in New York. This is an issue, and we don't connect the dots. We also had to literally end some turkeys' lives a little bit early because they got the flu too. So guess what? This Thanksgiving, enjoy it, but your turkey's going to be a little more expensive. Just because of this happening. Now, what's our biggest concern? You know what birds do in the winter? They fly south. You know where the outbreak wasn't? In the south. We're really worried that we're going to have another outbreak in the south this year. And if we have that, you're going to have even a more dramatic impact on what's happening to egg supply in the United States. Then I look at what's happening. We have a drought in California. We've had a drought for some time. We don't pay much attention to it. Well, if you look at what's happening in California, lettuce is up 45%, and tomatoes are up almost 11% in California. So why does that matter? Well, it matters to me because almost 75% of all lettuce in the United States comes from California. Almost 90% of all tomatoes come from California. The drought in California is going to impact you. So when you're ordering a salad and you don't understand why the cost on a salad is going up, 45% on lettuce is a huge margin to undertake. Now on $10, that's taking $10 to $10.50. But we have at times conversations where nobody can accept that we're raising prices at all. This is the challenge. And you're going to continue to see this in the food area because we cannot keep up with the cost fluctuations that we are seeing in today's world. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. And then we have this huge trend towards health. It's health and wellness today. We actually care about the food we put in our bodies. And you know what? If you look at this chart, all food is only increased less than 2%, but you look at organic and natural food increasing at double digits. The demand for natural and organic food is increasing. Anybody shop at Whole Foods? It's not cheap. It's my $200 store. I go in for milk, and it's $200 by the time I come out of there. Not kidding. It's always expensive. Here's the thing. This is going to be the demand of your future attendees. Your future attendees are going to care what type of food you're putting in front of them. And I don't mean whether it's steak or whether it's chicken. They're going to be asking you, is it organic, is it natural? Everybody's announcing this today. McDonald's announced that all their chicken products will be all organic by the year 2018. Everybody, Panera Bread just announced that they're going to cage-free eggs literally by 2018. Everybody is going down this mode. You know what it's not going to be? Cheaper. It's going to be more expensive, and we're not prepared for it. Because today, I always say, you no longer have attendees to meetings, you have participants. That's a big semantic shift. And you know what participants are going to do? They're going to demand what that experience looks like. They're not coming to attend. They're coming to participate. They're going to tell you what we expect. And that's going to be a big shift for us because you're going to have to get prepared. If they have it in their life, they're not going to a meeting to give up what they do in their everyday life. Health and wellness is going to be a part of what we do moving forward, especially with the generation push we see today. This is going to be something we're all going to have to deal with. And again, it's a cost issue. And you know, I always laugh because we freak out that a hotel will raise anything $1. But yet, Starbucks, if you get 4 cups of Starbucks a week at any Starbucks, you're literally going to pay $37 more a year because they increase their coffee. But nobody's freaking out, and I still see a line at every Starbucks because you're still going to go. But Chipotle is not a cheap burrito, and they just increased their cost. Why? Because it's good food. It's all organic. We all know that. It's one expensive burrito. I mean, it's a $10 burrito when you're done with it. But it's good food. And that's why people will pay more for good food. I'm just trying to connect the dots for you. What is happening in hotels is happening in your everyday life all the way around you. You just don't see it every day. And that's what we have to start being a little more cognizant of. So here's my big weather issue for this year. 2016 is an El Nino year for the United States. You know what that means? We're going to get hammered with rain on the West Coast. Hammered with rain. So most of you are saying, hey, you have a drought in California. Mike, that's good news. You don't want it all at one time, guys, because all we do is flood. Because the land is so dry and so barren that we're going to flood, and now flooding creates a whole nother issue for us leading down the pipe. So this is going to be a concern for us. If you see floods in the south, you see floods in the Midwest. Texas has had a drought for some time. They're going to get hammered in an El Nino year. El Nino year just means that the Pacific Ocean is warming, and it means there's going to bring a lot of rain with it. It's going to be a challenge for us, and it could have major impact to our food supply moving forward. Air service. Air service is a big issue because you know what's happening with this all-time record demand? People are moving to second-tier cities. Second-tier cities are now behaving like first-tier cities because they have that type of demand. Well, here's the challenge. You can't afford a first-tier city or you can't find availability. Well, if you look at what's happened over the last 3 years in air service, 14% decline in all the major airports outside the top 10. The top 10 airports only lost about 1% of their airlift, or seats coming into the destination. Everywhere else, all other airports, lost almost 15% of seats. So you can't get into the major city because you can't find rooms, and now you're going to second-tier cities and you can't find air. That's a challenge, and it's going to continue to be a challenge moving forward. You saw the airlines pull out of some of those major, and look, I'm not beating up the airlines. They're profitable for the first time in their history. So you know what, good for them. But they also have a model today they're going to continue to be profitable. They're not just going to add routes because somebody else is. This is going to continue to push us and pinch us as we move forward. So let's talk about disruption in our industry. Here's the one thing everybody wants to talk about. You know, it's the shared economy, and we want to talk about Airbnb, and I hear hoteliers freaking out because, oh my God, they're taking away share from us. I was on a panel where a planner said, hey, I've got rooms going to Airbnb, and now I'm hitting attrition, and I can't track them. What are you going to do about it? And I said, why don't you take out a block with Airbnb? And she went, hadn't thought about that. Said, take out a block. They're not even going to charge you attrition. Just take out 5 rooms because you're going to have a certain audience that may want to be there. And no matter what you think, and I was on another panel where they asked me, the question was this a good thing or a bad thing? I go, who cares? It is. It doesn't matter if I think it's good or bad. It's here, so how are we going to deal with it? And what does it really mean? Well, I'm a big believer, again, Mayo Clinic. Let's go back and see what the data is really telling us. Well, when you look at Airbnb today, I mean, they have 1.5 million units worldwide. They've got 1 million travelers on any given night. They're going to do almost $1 billion in revenue this year. Now, that sounds big. I just told you the U.S. is going to do $140 billion in rooms revenue. They're not even 0.1% of the United States, and this is their global impact. So let's all take a deep breath before we start to figure out that they've changed the world. And I'm a big believer in, did it change behavior? Behavior didn't change with Airbnb. You know what Airbnb stands for? Air, bed, and breakfast. We've been talking about bed and breakfast since the 1990s because it was very popular in the 90s. All Airbnb did was make it easy. I've had friends, I grew up in Southern California my adult life, and I've had friends for years that have gone to San Diego or Huntington Beach or Newport Beach and rented homes. I've had friends that have gone to Napa every year and rented homes. They used to have to go through real estate agents. You know what they do now? They go through an app. That's the difference. This has a bigger global impact than it does the United States, but again, I'm one about data. So when you look at this chart, and I know this one's really hard to read, but all you need to know is everything to the right, as further right you go, the more rooms you have of Airbnb in any of these cities. Well, you know what you'll see up here? It's New York, it's LA, it's Chicago, it's San Francisco. What's common with all those cities? You can't find a room, and if you do, it's over $700. So why are they so popular there? Because you can't find a room, and if they are, it's really expensive. That is where the real meat of Airbnb is. And then when you really start to look at it, this is interesting. So if you took a look at San Francisco, 26% of the hotels where Airbnb is located, there's only 26% of all hotels that are even in those zip codes. 72% of all of Airbnb's inventory in San Francisco is in a zip code that does not have hotels. 72%. So what does that tell you? The people that are staying at Airbnb, you ever tried to fight traffic in San Francisco? If I got to be all the way in the other side of town, why would I go in a hotel and have to drive if I could actually stay in the community that I need to do business in? Or stay in the community that I'm going to be visiting while I'm there? That is the shift in Airbnb. And that is what we really have to understand. And this chart will show you 65% of all of Airbnb's inventory is a full house rental, not rooms. That's not your hotel attendee. They're not going to go rent a full home when they're there for your meeting. But they are going to rent a full home when they bring their family so that they can have a kitchen and a backyard and they want to grill. They can do all of those things that you would normally do at home on a vacation. That's the main piece of Airbnb. And I try to keep it in perspective because it's not what everybody thinks it is. And everybody thinks it's only about cost. When you look at this chart, in certain cities, San Francisco, Chicago, Houston, it's more expensive to stay in Airbnb than it is in a hotel. It's not about that. It's about comfort. It's about somebody wanting a refrigerator and wanting a kitchen and wanting that comfort of being at home. So you've got to keep it in perspective. And my whole point is, if it's in some cases more expensive and you still have people staying there, there's nothing you're going to do to make them stop. This is a choice. And I'm a believer we live in an on-demand society. We're going to do what we want, where we want it, and how we want it. And it's our job to understand that and be really good everywhere that people want to play. And that really is the shift when it comes to Airbnb. And then I always ask, well, why? Why are more people looking at Airbnb today? Well, if you look at it, we have more renters than we do buyers today. More people are renting and they move to the urban cities than they are buying homes by a huge amount. We've had this huge uptick in renters in the United States. And here's the kicker. It actually costs more to rent than to buy today. Monthly mortgage payments are way down while rent payments are way up. But this is telling me if you're somebody living in New York and you're paying $5,000 for your apartment and you can rent out your one room for 3 times a month for $1,500, you're going to help pay the rent. That's kind of the issue. And that's kind of what's driving the Airbnb phenomenon. So Uber events, it's not just there, shared economy. Uber not only has Uber, if you're a transportation company, get ready because Uber events is now here. And Uber events is now doing group transportation for you at the click of a key. You reserve it, I think it's only 10 hours in advance. You have to reserve it and you're good to go. You got 16 of you and you're trying to figure out how many cabs you're going to need, don't need it anymore. Just go to Uber events and they'll get you there. That's the new shift for them, and they're moving into our dynamic, and I love that they're up in the game. So here is my all-time favorite quote of all time. I said Klosh was one of my favorites. This is my all-time favorite quote. And this is Alvin Toffler. He's known as a futurist. He was the associate editor for Fortune magazine. But he talks about illiteracy in today's world is not your ability to read or write. It's your ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And when I think about that as an industry, learn, unlearn, and relearn. We are great at learning. We are great at relearning. We are really bad at unlearning. We are really bad at getting rid of what we think we know. And I always say this, if somebody gives you a new idea and the first thing out of your mouth is, that's a silly idea, it's never going to work, we've tried it before, you're illiterate in today's world. And I promise you, you will be part of the 40% that isn't relevant in any significant way in 5 years. Your first thought should be, how do we get that done? Now, the answer may be, it's a silly idea, it can't happen, we've tried that before. But if your first thought is why it's not going to work, you're illiterate today. And you have to understand that. Today it's about change, and everything changes. I'm going to show you Mark King. He's one of the titans in golf. He took TaylorMade from literally making $500 million a year to $1.8 billion because he thought of the world differently. And Mark King talks about change in the world of golf, and I want to show you what that looks like.
What point when we keep changing, does it cease to be golf?
Yeah, but see, here's my thing. I don't think you have to create a 15-inch cup per se or foot golf. I don't think you have to do that. I think the issue is that when somebody comes to the course, whether it's a public, private, municipal, whatever, the environment around the game is not very fun and inviting. So let me give you an example. Most country clubs, you can't wear jeans in the grill. You go to any really nice restaurant in San Diego on Saturday night, you can go in with jeans, no socks and some loafers, and a nice shirt like you have untucked. But you go to my country club, which is you can't do that. It's true. Why? It's stuffy and it's old-fashioned and we're hanging on to these traditions that don't make any difference.
I love his interview, and believe me, it's a lot longer, but that piece is our industry. You think about our meetings, sometimes they're stuffy, and sometimes we are holding on to tradition for no reason. So then you ask yourself, well, Mike, how do you take tradition and mix it with innovation? Well, let me show you. I got to see these guys live, and this is a group that you think you're going to be listening to classical music, but they've been able to reinvent what pop sounds like.
say it's hard to me with you. That's all you'd ever hear me say. But since you've been gone, I can't breathe for the first time. I'm so moving on, yeah, yeah. Thanks to you, now I get what I want. Since you've been gone.
That is a really cool group that I got to see live. And you see what they've done, really neat. And they don't take themselves too seriously. You know what they're called? Well Strung. That's the name of the group, by the way. Seriously, they're a really fun bunch of guys. You know, we talk about change, and you keep hearing fun, and it used to be almost disciplinary when we talked about changing behavior. And today, fun is what's going to change behavior. And when you think about meetings, I think we kind of felt guilty because of the downturn that we couldn't have fun in meetings. Fun is what changes behavior. Fun in today's world is what's going to move the needle for us. And I'm going to show you something called the fun theory that's actually done by Volkswagen, and it'll show you how fun can actually change someone's behavior. So that is a really, really cool way to look at this. 66% of the people change their behavior from one day to the next. And they did this for multiple days. So that's how they did the average on it. But again, it just kind of reminds us that fun matters. And then we look at where we're headed. And I'm going to end with you a little bit about wearable technology. And we've been talking about wearable technology to death. And I'm not talking about the iWatch. And candidly, guys, it's 3 years old. I mean, as far as the technology, it's not new, it's not innovative. But congratulations, Apple just convinced you it was, and you spent a lot of money on it. But there's a lot of other things that are out there that are much more innovative. And wearable is going to change the way we look at our business. And I've shown some of you HoloLens before and what Microsoft is doing, but this is what we call Secret, and it is a new piece that's coming out. Well, 5 years ago, I talked about something called the sixth sense, which was where we wouldn't have a physical device. And guys, it's here. And an MIT student had built that 5 years ago in a laboratory. It looked a lot clunkier than that, but it's where we're headed. It's where any surface is going to become your device. It's where the device will be part of your body, or as far as what you think of a device is going to be part of your body. It's virtual. I thank you for your time. The whole point today was hopefully to get you to think a little bit. Things are different. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Appreciate it.